Greetings, esteemed viewers of our channel. Today, we've curated a unique and compelling narrative that we believe will deeply resonate with you. We delve into the personal odyssey of relocation, the disillusionment with the familiar, and the serendipitous discovery of contentment in an unexpected locale. Alas, the squalor, mountainous piles of refuse, brazen rodents scurrying through the streets, throngs of aggressively inclined migrants, the fetid stench of human waste emanating from the homeless relieving themselves in historical centers, and other disheartening indicators of utter degradation in France have, regrettably, become the reality our protagonist faced. These lamentable circumstances compelled a Frenchwoman, weary of the prevailing conditions, to make a challenging yet, as it turned out, fateful decision to move to Moscow. Gabrielle Duvoisin, a talented engineering researcher in the field of biology, now shares her insights on her own channel, elucidating why she finally feels genuinely happy, free, and secure in Russia. Her story is an insider's perspective, a candid account of the contrast between two worlds, of shattered stereotypes and unforeseen revelations. The level of comfort, which I absolutely did not foresee, became a delightful surprise. I was astonished to observe the vast array of advantages that life in Russia offers, particularly when juxtaposed with France. When I was merely contemplating the move to Moscow, I was inundated with prophecies of a harsh, unbearable existence amidst perpetual snows, of grueling, interminable queues for the most basic necessities, and of a pervasive, all-consuming bureaucracy that would suffocate any semblance of freedom. However, to my immense astonishment, the reality was precisely the opposite. It is here that I experience a significantly greater level of comfort, which, unfortunately, is not always readily available in France. I am particularly impressed by the service sector. Whether it's the impeccable service in restaurants, the pristine cleanliness of the streets, or the precise, well-coordinated operation of public transportation here. Without exaggeration, everything is of the highest caliber. Let's begin with the simplest, yet most significant joys that make our lives easier and more pleasant. For instance, in Moscow, I can easily and swiftly order virtually anything I require. Food from any restaurant, medications, anything at all, and it will all be delivered to me in the shortest possible time, literally within minutes. This incredible level of convenience quickly becomes habitual and is taken for granted. I even notice that I am gradually becoming a bit lazier. The need to go somewhere myself, organize something, or plan something disappears. All problems are solved with a flick of the wrist. In France, I had to plan a trip to the pharmacy in advance, carefully finding out where it was open at the time I needed it. But in Russia, I simply lazily press a couple of buttons in a convenient application and voila! In about 20 minutes, a polite courier is already knocking on my door. Isn't that a miracle? Restaurants operate virtually 24/7 throughout the day and night, and most of them offer truly high-quality, exquisite dishes at quite reasonable, democratic prices. So the opportunity to have dinner or lunch outside the home no longer requires any special expenses and does not break the bank. All services here function incredibly quickly, and employees are invariably polite and attentive to the needs of the customer, which makes service in Russia much more pleasant and comfortable than in France. In fact, after I lived in and got used to Moscow service, I even became afraid to remember the French waiters, for whom you are not a respected client, but a sworn enemy who dared to disturb their refined existence with your ridiculous order. Sunday, which does not die, but lives a full life. Another striking difference that immediately catches the eye is the completely different rhythm of life. For example, France is a country of almost complete paralysis on Sundays. If in Russia you can continue to live in your usual rhythm without changing your plans, then in France on this day the world seems to freeze, plunges into suspended animation. Almost all shops are closed, cafes work terribly, Public transport runs so rarely and irregularly that it is often much easier to walk to the desired place than to try to wait for a bus or tram. But in Moscow, Sunday is not a day of silence and peace, but a full-fledged time for active life, for recreation and entertainment. Want to take a walk in the beautiful parks? Please, the doors are open. Need to buy something urgently? Easy, all the shops are open. Decided to have a snack at 16:30. No one will look at you like you're crazy because the kitchens in restaurants and cafes don't close for a break or for lunch. I got used to this rhythm so quickly that now it's even hard for me to imagine how I used to live in France in conditions of constant restrictions and inconveniences. Transport in Russia is something incredible. It's just another universe. The French metro is a separate, very specific kind of survival quest that not everyone can handle. Overcrowded carriages, constant crowds of people, chaos reigning everywhere, mountains of rubbish, unpleasant, repulsive smells, and the feeling that you might accidentally become an involuntary witness to some kind of violent crime at any moment. Unfortunately, this is the harsh reality of the French underground. In Moscow, everything is completely different. There is order and tranquility. Trains always arrive on time, strictly according to the schedule. Stations are kept in perfect cleanliness. And, most importantly, people behave in a civilized manner, respecting each other. No one stands in the aisle, hindering other passengers. No one shouts at the top of their lungs. No one gets into a fight over a seat. Even during rush hour, I have never encountered a real crush. Although, of course, I do not rule out that it sometimes happens. However, compared to the depressing French realities, traveling on public transport here seems like a fairy tale. It's like heaven and earth, incomparable things. What is it like to live and not fear for your life, for your safety? When I lived in France, I had developed a kind of built-in instinct for self-preservation. I simply tried not to go to some areas of the city. I avoided them. For example, the central part of Montpellier. Theoretically, this should be a pleasant, beautiful place where you can relax and unwind in the company of close friends, but in practice it is, unfortunately, a high-risk area, especially for women. You only have to walk past some cafe, filled mostly with men, most of whom are migrants, and you immediately feel hundreds of assessing, unambiguous looks, as if you have already been stripped and violated in absentia. This constant, oppressive feeling of inner discomfort completely discouraged me from taking walks around the city, so most often I just had to stay at home to avoid trouble. In Russia, I feel much more calm and safe. Of course, it is impossible to say that everywhere and always the situation is absolutely perfect, but at least in the center of Moscow, I have never encountered situations that would cause me the animal fear. The horror that I constantly experienced in France. Here I can walk the streets calmly, without looking around and without fearing for my life. These feelings contrast sharply with how Europeans in general perceive Russia, how it is portrayed in the Western media. Many of my friends simply do not believe me when I tell them that I feel much more free and protected here than in Europe. The media often creates an image of Russia as a closed, unfree country where totalitarianism reigns. But my personal experience says the opposite. My reality is completely different. From a financial point of view, life here also seems much more comfortable and affordable. I can afford to move around the city as it is convenient for me, without saving on transport. For example, I often use taxi services because its cost compared to the same Paris is much cheaper, which allows me to save time and effort. Say what you think. Easy and simple. Another cultural shock I experienced was real freedom of speech, but not in the perverted sense in which it is understood in the West, where you seem to be able to say whatever you want, but only if it fits into the framework of the correct, approved agenda. In Russia, I can freely express my opinion on almost any topic without fear of consequences, while in Europe I have to constantly and very carefully choose my words so as not to incur the wrath of the public. For example, if you dare to publicly say that mass migration has led not only to obvious advantages, but also to serious problems, be prepared to be immediately branded as a fascist or racist and ostracized. In Russia, on the contrary, people are open to constructive discussions. There are absolutely no taboos on discussing even the most acute and painful socially significant topics. And this brings enormous relief. Now I do not have the painful need to constantly filter my words and thoughts, carefully weighing each statement. Russia is a country that is confidently moving forward, developing and prospering. Another important and pleasant difference is the lower level of bureaucracy. In Russia, many issues can be resolved online without leaving home, and it takes only a few minutes. While in France, even the simplest administrative procedure, instantly turns into a protracted, painful process that requires a huge amount of time and nerves. This striking difference is especially noticeable in the banking sector. In France, it can take several painful days to resolve even the most basic issues, while in Russia, most operations are performed in just a couple of clicks in the mobile application. I travel a lot around Russia, and with great pleasure I notice that even small cities are actively developing and transforming. Everywhere there is active construction, new modern roads, cozy parks, stylish cafes, and restaurants are appearing. In Moscow, the dynamics of development are generally just amazing. It seems to me that this beautiful city grows and is updated literally every day, becoming more beautiful and convenient for living. In France, the situation, unfortunately, is quite different. Everything is much sadder there. Sometimes I get the impression that the country simply lives off its rich past and does not develop at all, having stopped in its development. A striking and indicative confirmation of the huge difference between the two countries was an unpleasant incident that happened to me during my last visit to France in January this year. Arriving at Charles de Gaulle Airport, I, as usual, took the train to get to Paris. Literally 5 minutes after the start of the trip, some strange man entered the carriage, who shamelessly relieved himself right there, in front of all the passengers. I was simply stunned by such impudence and impunity, but none of the passengers even tried to intervene. No one made the slightest remark to him. People just silently exchanged glances, got up from their seats, and silently moved to another carriage. This has become so normal that no one even expressed the slightest indignation. In France, there are currently practically no video cameras or security anywhere, so all the passengers simply decided not to use this carriage until the end of the route in order to avoid further excesses. I'm even a little embarrassed to talk about it, but this man was a migrant, and this, unfortunately, has also become part of the French reality. Because in France it has now become politically incorrect to talk about problems associated with migration. But it is such outrageous situations that make me see reality as it really is, without embellishment and illusions. From my very first visit to Russia, I felt some special, inexplicable attachment to this country. Here I did not encounter anything that could alert me, scare me, or create at least the slightest discomfort. Russia immediately became a real home for me, a country to which I have special, warm feelings that cannot be expressed in words. At the moment, I have been living in Russia permanently for almost a year, and not once, not for a second, have I regretted my difficult, but very important choice. Here I feel truly happy, free, and infinitely grateful to this large and great country for the incredible opportunities that it has provided me. Russia has become a new home for me, a place where I can live and create without fear for my future.